You can have a wedding anytime. Adrian, this is my first baby. That's what my sister said 6 weeks before I stood at the end of an aisle lined with empty white chairs. She said it casually, like she was picking a restaurant, not choosing her baby shower over my wedding. Then she booked it same day, same hour, one by one. My entire family chose her. My mother, my aunts, my cousins, even my father, the man who shook my hand and promised he'd stand beside me as I waited for my bride. He chose finger sandwiches at a country club over his own son's vows. 7 people showed up to my wedding. 417 messages showed up the moment they realized what they'd missed. Not one text on the day I got married. Not one call when I stood there without my father. But 417 notifications when a single photo exposed the truth about my life and the lie they'd told themselves about me. Before I take you back to how it unraveled, ask yourself this. Why did my entire family skip my wedding? What changed so drastically that 417 messages flooded in overnight? And what exactly did they think they were entitled to after walking away? My name is Adrian Farrow. I'm 29 years old. And if you looked at my family from the outside, you'd think we were solid, stable, respectable, inside the Farrow household. There was one rule nobody ever said out loud. Everything revolved around my sister, Colette, my father, Richard Farrow. Spent 32 years as a regional bank branch manager in Hartford. He believed in pressed shirts, firm handshakes, and the idea that a man's worth could be measured by the size of his paycheck. My mother, Diane, curated our lives the way some women curate magazine spreads book club on Thursdays. Hydrangeas trimmed precisely along the walkway of our colonial house in Glastonbury. Appearances mattered. Status mattered more. 5 years ago, Colette married Brett Whitfield at the time. Brett was gold-plated success, commercial real estate, Fairfield County money, country club memberships. He bought Colette a Lexus. He bought her a Cartier bracelet. And quietly, strategically, he bought my parents' loyalty. Brett paid their $3,200 monthly mortgage. He added my mother to a credit card for convenience. He funded a kitchen renovation that my father still refers to as an investment. In exchange, Colette became the crown jewel of the Farrow family. She hasn't held a steady job in 6 years. She calls herself a lifestyle consultant. I've never seen a client. But in my family, marrying wealth counts as achievement. And then there was me, the younger son who didn't go into finance, the one who freelanced as a graphic illustrator, editorial pieces, independent publishing, work that required talent but didn't come with a corner office or a company car. In my father's world, I wasn't unstable, I was unfinished. I didn't resent Colette for marrying rich. I resented that the moment Brett's money entered the equation, I became optional. And optional is a dangerous place to stand in a family that worships security over loyalty. I met Marina Delaney 3 years ago at an outdoor art fair in New Haven. She was standing in front of her own painting, a large oil portrait of a woman sitting alone in a subway car. Fluorescent light cutting across her face. Marina was frowning at it like it had personally offended her. I laughed without meaning to. She turned. And there was something in her eyes focused, stubborn, alive that made me forget whatever clever thing I'd planned to say. Marina is a contemporary realist painter. Oils, portraits, urban interiors, the kind of work that makes strangers go quiet when they stand in front of it. Some months she sold well through small galleries. Some months we ate cheap pasta and called it tradition. We rented a ground-floor live work studio in an old Victorian on Elm Street. 12-foot ceilings, north-facing windows, paint-stained floors. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. To me, that mattered. To my family, it did not, my father once asked. So what's her backup plan, Colette liked to say. It's sweet that you support her hobby. Hobby. They looked at Marina and saw instability. They looked at me and saw a man choosing love over leverage. But here's what they never understood: Marina wasn't reckless. She was disciplined in a way my father would have respected if he hadn't already decided she wasn't worth respecting. And somewhere between the late nights, the smell of turpentine, and the quiet certainty in her voice when she talked about light and shadow, I realized something simple. I wasn't marrying potential, I was marrying talent, the kind they would one day pretend they saw coming. 8 months before the wedding, I brought Marina to Thanksgiving at my parents' house in Glastonbury. Colette arrived 10 minutes late in Brett's new Range Rover, carrying 2 bottles of Napa Valley Cabernet. $200 each, she made sure everyone knew. My mother took the wine with both hands like it was ceremonial. Marina had spent the morning baking a pear tart from scratch. My mother set it on the counter without comment. We sat down to eat. Turkey, crystal glasses, polished silverware that only came out twice a year. Brett talked about a new development project in Stamford. My father nodded along like he was listening to a TED talk. Then he turned to Marina. "So," he said, carving his turkey with surgical precision, "when are you planning to get a real job?" The table went quiet in that particular way families perfect, everyone pretending they didn't hear the knife hit bone. Marina didn't flinch. "I have one," she said calmly. "I paint." Brett chuckled. "That's not exactly recession-proof." Colette tilted her head. "At least Adrian's supportive," she added, like she was complimenting me for adopting a stray. I felt my jaw tighten. I wanted to say something sharp. Instead, I reached under the table and took Marina's hand. What none of them knew was that a few weeks earlier, our landlord Harold Brenton had introduced Marina to a private collector. Harold was 68, silver-haired, quiet, wore the same corduroy jacket every day, and drank black coffee from a chipped mug. He'd started stopping by while Marina worked, offering small observations. Warm the shadow half a degree. Let the silence breathe. "One afternoon," he told her, "your work reminds me of someone I once represented. He sells for 6 figures now." I assumed it was kindness. It wasn't. Harold had been watching far more closely than any of us realized. And that Thanksgiving dinner was the first time I understood that my family didn't measure talent. They measured income. And by that metric, they believed Marina, and by extension, me, were losing. Marina proposed to me in January. No grand gesture, no restaurant, just the two of us sitting on the studio floor. Snow pressed against the tall windows, paint drying on half-finished canvases. She didn't even have a ring yet. She just looked at me and said, "Let's stop building everything separately." I said yes before she finished the sentence. We chose June 14th, a small garden ceremony near Mystic, Connecticut, 42 guests, wild flowers from a local farm, an arch I built myself from salvaged oak and sanded smooth at night after work. It wasn't extravagant, it was intentional. When I called my parents with the date, my father's first response wasn't congratulations. "June 14th, let me check." 2 days later he called back. "I'll be there." "Son, I'll stand with you, I promise." I held on to that word, promise, like it weighed something. My mother asked how much the venue cost. Colette sent a single text, "Congrats. Let me know if you need anything." She never followed up. Marina and I did everything ourselves. I designed the invitations by hand, cream cardstock, watercolor eucalyptus. Each one slightly different. They felt like us. Looking back, I should have been suspicious that Colette didn't argue about the date. Silence from my sister has never meant peace. It has always meant strategy. 3 weeks before the wedding, my Aunt Patricia called me. She never calls without a reason. "Adrian, honey, are you going to Colette's shower too? Or just your wedding?" "They're the same day." "Right." I was standing in the studio holding a piece of sandpaper. I stopped moving. "What shower?" Her silence told me everything before she spoke. "The baby shower. June 14th. Greenwich Country Club." "Didn't you get the invitation?" I hadn't. I called Colette immediately. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice bright, polished. "Oh my God. Adrian, I meant to tell you. The only date the club had available was June 14th. It's a whole scheduling nightmare. You know how these places are." My wedding was at 3:00 p.m. in Mystic. Her shower was at noon in Greenwich, an hour and a half away on a perfect traffic day. No one could attend both. She knew that. I knew that. Geography knew that. "You knew my date months ago," I said. A pause. Then sugar. "You can have a wedding anytime. Adrian, this is my first baby." She said it like it was math. Like one event was inherently worth more. I confirmed the timeline with Aunt Patricia. The baby shower invitations had gone out 2 weeks before I mailed my final wedding reminders. She had known. She had chosen. I called my mother. "Honey," she said carefully, "this is Colette's first child. The family really needs to be there. My wedding is that day." "Well, can't you postpone just a few weeks? Deposits were paid. Guests had booked flights. The arch was already built." I called my father last. He exhaled heavily. "Let me talk to your mother." He didn't call back for 3 days. I texted him, "Are you still standing with me on June 14th? He read it. No reply. That was the moment the conflict stopped being inconvenient and started being intentional. The RSVPs started shifting quietly. At first, it was distant cousins, then aunts, then my Uncle Tom, who had told me 6 months earlier he wouldn't miss it for the world. Out of 38 family members invited, 22 declined within a single week. Every single one of them, I later confirmed, was attending Greenwich. I didn't beg. I asked once. I called my mother again. "Are you coming to my wedding?" A pause. Not confusion, not hesitation, calculation. We're trying to figure out logistics. "Honey, Colette's event is earlier in the day. It's an hour and a half away." Well, maybe not everyone needs to be at both. At both. Like my wedding was optional programming. I called my father that night. "Dad, I need a straight answer. Are you standing with me?" He exhaled slowly. "Son, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. Like I was the one escalating. The next morning, I counted the updated responses again. 26 no's now. The pattern was too clean to be coincidence. Rachel, my closest friend since college, an ER nurse who has zero tolerance for hypocrisy, called me that evening. "You need to see this," she said. Years ago, my mother had added Rachel to the extended family group chat. Nobody ever removed her. And Rachel, being Rachel, screenshots everything. She came over with her laptop and laid it out like evidence. Colette hadn't casually mentioned the shower. She had called each family member individually, strategic conversations. "To my mother, if you don't come, it'll look like you don't care about your first grandchild. To Aunt Patricia Brett's family, we'll all be there. It'll be embarrassing if ours isn't. And to my father, in the family group thread Rachel still had access to, Adrian will understand. He's used to being disappointed." I stared at that sentence for a long time. He's used to being disappointed. Typed by my sister, read by my parents. Unchallenged. Then Rachel showed me the final layer. Brett was still paying my parents' $3,200 mortgage. He covered groceries, renovations, utilities, comfort. This wasn't just emotional favoritism. It was financial gravity. If they chose me publicly, they risked destabilizing the source of their security. Colette didn't have to threaten anyone. The leverage was already built into the system. I closed the laptop slowly. That night, I drafted one final group message. No accusations, no pleading, just the date, time, address, and one line: "I hope to see you there." I pressed send at 10:47 p.m. No one replied. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel panic. I felt clarity. I wasn't losing them. They were revealing themselves. And I stopped asking anyone to choose me. From that point forward, I was done negotiating for my own wedding day. June 14th, 7:02 a.m. I was buttoning my shirt in the small guest room of the inn near Mystic when my phone rang. "Dad." I stared at it for a full second before answering. "Adrian," he began, and I could already hear the distance in his voice. "Your mother and I, Colette's shower starts at noon. With the drive, we just don't think we can make it to Mystic by 3. 8 seconds. That's how long I stood there without speaking. 8 seconds where every Father's Day card I ever wrote him collapsed in on itself. "You promised," I said. "I know, and I'm sorry. But this is her first baby. This is my only wedding day." He didn't respond to that. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, son." I hung up before he could finish the sentence. Rachel, who was adjusting my tie in the mirror, didn't say a word. She just tightened the knot and stepped back. The garden venue sat behind a small coastal inn overlooking a stretch of salt marsh where the water turned silver in the afternoon light. I had spent 2 weekends building the arch from salvaged oak, sanded smooth, tied with eucalyptus and white ribbon. It looked exactly the way we imagined. From a distance, the rows of white linen chairs looked full. Up close, they weren't. 42 chairs, 35 empty, 7 occupied. Marina stood at the end of the aisle, waiting for me, her hands steady, her shoulders squared in that quiet way she carries herself when something matters. Rachel, 2 of Marina's friends from art school, my college roommate, who'd driven 5 hours, Harold Brenton in a navy 3-piece suit I had never seen him wear, and the retired judge officiating. 7. The wind moved through the empty rows, brushing the lavender tied to each chair like it was trying to animate them. I stood at the start of the aisle, alone. No father at my side. No family in the front row. Just the sound of a violin and cello from 2 local students hired for the ceremony. I was about to walk forward by myself when I heard steady footsteps behind me. "I believe I'm slightly overdressed for a garden wedding," Harold said. I turned. He stood there in that navy suit, pocket square perfectly folded, cufflinks catching the light. I noticed, faintly engraved, the initials BG Brenton Gallery. "Your father should be here," he said calmly. "But since he isn't, someone who values you should." He extended his arm. I don't cry easily. I didn't then. But something inside me shifted, not broken, not collapsing, just recalibrated. I took his arm. We walked. 7 people stood as I moved down the aisle, 7 pairs of hands clapping softly, 7 witnesses to a promise that didn't require a crowd. When I reached Marina, she looked at me, not at the empty chairs, not at the absence, at me. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. We wrote our own vows. She spoke about building something that couldn't be purchased. I spoke about choosing each other without conditions. When we kissed, the applause echoed strangely against the empty seats. Afterward, we ordered pizza instead of a plated dinner. We danced barefoot on the grass. The sun set behind the marsh in streaks of gold and pink. It was imperfect. It was quiet. It was ours. Later, when the music faded and chairs were being folded, I sat in one of the empty seats and opened my phone. 0 messages. No congratulations. No apologies. Not even a generic text. I checked Instagram. Colette had posted 14 photos. Pink balloons, champagne flutes, my father standing beside her, his hand resting proudly on her stomach. The caption read, "Surrounded by love. Family is everything. Family is everything." I locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. 35 empty chairs. 7 who showed up. I stopped counting who wasn't there and started memorizing who was. The silence lasted 8 days. Not one member of my family texted to ask how the wedding went. Not one call. Not even a neutral hope it was nice. But Colette's Instagram stayed active. Photos from the baby shower. Pink and gold balloons. Gift tables. My father smiling beside her like nothing else had happened that day. The caption under one post read, "Grateful for a family that always shows up." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. Then I put the phone face down and went back to work. Marina didn't push me to talk about it. She just painted. A week after the wedding, she started a new series. Large canvases, quiet interiors, spaces built for connection with something missing from them. A dining table set for 8 with 1 untouched plate. A church pew with a folded program resting alone at one end. And then the one that stopped me in my tracks. A garden in late afternoon light. An arch of oak. 42 white chairs. Lavender tied to each, 35 empty. She titled it The 7th Chair. She never explained it. She didn't have to. Harold began visiting the studio more often. He'd stand in front of the canvases without speaking, coffee cooling in his hand. One afternoon, he pulled out his phone and typed something quietly. "People need to see this," he said. I assumed he meant a small gallery showing, maybe a regional exhibit. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the wedding, Harold invited us upstairs to his apartment for coffee. Not casually, formally. There was a cardboard box on the table when we arrived. Inside were exhibition catalogs. Thick, glossy covers, photographs of Harold standing beside artists I recognized from museum walls. "I ran Brenton Gallery in Chelsea for 22 years, he said calmly. "I represented 43 artists. 7 are in major permanent collections." I felt the room tilt slightly. He folded his hands. "I sent Marina's work to someone 6 months ago, before the wedding. I needed to be certain first." He slid a printed contract across the table. Victor Ashland, private collector, international reputation. The kind of name that appears in auction catalogs next to 8-figure numbers. He had already purchased one painting. $85,000. Marina met my eyes. She had known. She had kept it quiet so the wedding wouldn't become about money. There was more. A formal proposal for 12 original works over 18 months. Total value $450,000. And an invitation from Caldwell Gallery in Manhattan for a solo exhibition. I sat there in Harold's kitchen, the same man who once brought us tomatoes from his garden, realizing something profound. While my family was choosing finger sandwiches and status optics, something enormous had already been moving quietly beneath the surface. They had judged us too early, and we had been building something far bigger than they ever imagined. The contract was real. I read every page twice in the attorney's office on Park Avenue while Marina sat beside me, hands steady but eyes sharper than I'd ever seen them. 12 original paintings over 18 months. Total commission value $450,000. Installments tied to delivery milestones, insurance clauses, intellectual property protections, gallery representation locked in. This wasn't a lucky break. It was structural. Victor Ashland wasn't buying art on impulse. He was building a relationship. Caldwell Gallery confirmed the exhibition dates that same afternoon. A solo show. Title already approved the seventh chair when we stepped back onto the Manhattan sidewalk. The city looked different, not bigger, clearer. "This is more than my dad made in 5 years at the bank," I said quietly. Harold, walking beside us, nodded once. "And it's only the beginning. We told no one. Not out of secrecy, out of peace." My family still believed Marina was an unstable artist living month to month. They still believed I had chosen love over leverage. They had no idea leverage was already shifting. A week later, Victor called Marina directly. I was in the studio when she put him on speaker. Hands streaked with paint. Marcus and I, he corrected himself gently. Then laughed, "Forgive me." "Marina, I understand you and your husband didn't get much of a honeymoon." His voice carried that quiet authority of someone who has never needed to rush. "My yacht, the Meridian, will be in Monaco next month. 10 days. Consider it a professional courtesy. A 180-foot motor yacht in the Mediterranean." I shook my head instinctively. "We can't accept that." Marina covered the phone. "Harold says he does this for every long-term artist. It's relationship building. Relationship building." The phrase landed differently now. I thought of 35 empty chairs. Of my father saying, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Of Colette's caption, "Family is everything." I had spent years shrinking myself so no one felt threatened. Not anymore. Marina accepted. We flew to Nice in July, boarded the Meridian as the Mediterranean cut blue against the hull, marble floors, linen sheets, evenings filled with collectors, curators, critics from London and Berlin discussing Marina's work like it was inevitable. At dinner on the third night, Victor raised a glass. "Marina Delaney is the most exciting realist painter I've encountered in 2 decades. The curator from the Tate leaned forward. "This has Biennale potential." I sat beside my wife and said nothing. For the first time in my life, I was in a room where value wasn't measured by income alone, but by impact. And what we had built in a rented studio with 12-foot ceilings and north-facing light suddenly carried weight far beyond Connecticut. My family still thought we were barely afloat. They had no idea we were already crossing oceans. On our last night aboard the Meridian, I did something I rarely do. I posted a photo. No explanation. No tags. No flexing. Just Marina standing at the bow in a white silk dress she'd found in a small boutique in Nice. The Monaco coastline soft in the distance. My arms around her shoulders. A glass of champagne on the table beside us. Caption Honeymoon. Grateful for the ones who showed up. I posted it at 9:03 p.m. local time. Then I put my phone in the drawer and went to sleep. When I woke up, the screen was unrecognizable. Notifications stacked so high I had to scroll for nearly a minute to reach the bottom. 417 missed calls and messages. 417. The same family who couldn't send a single text on my wedding day suddenly had urgent questions about where I was. My father 23 missed calls. 11 texts. "Adrian, call me." "Whose yacht is that? I didn't know Marina was doing this well." "Son, please call your dad." My mother 18 calls. "Oh my God, is that Monaco? We should celebrate when you're back. Celebrate." The word almost made me laugh. Colette, 7 calls. "Wait, what is Marina represented?" "We need to talk." And then Brett. He had never texted me directly before. "Adrian, congrats. Is your wife working with a gallery? I'd love to connect." I stared at that message longer than the rest. The man whose money had once bought my parents' loyalty was now trying to network through the brother-in-law he'd barely acknowledged. I read every message. I responded to none. Marina found me on the balcony later that morning. "You don't have to answer today," she said. "I won't," I replied. That afternoon, I unlocked the family group chat for the first time since muting it. I typed slowly. "Thank you for your messages. Marina signed a major commission 6 weeks ago. The yacht belongs to her patron, Victor Ashland. Our honeymoon was a gift. I won't pretend June 14th didn't matter. It did, Dad. You promised to stand with me and chose not to. Mom, you chose a shower over your son's wedding. Colette. You scheduled your event knowing the conflict. I'm not angry, but I need distance. When I'm ready to talk, I'll reach out." I pressed send. 4 hours passed before anyone replied. Silence again. Only this time. It wasn't mine. It was theirs. And the balance had shifted. 3 weeks after we returned from Monaco, Caldwell Gallery released the official press announcement, Marina Delaney, the 7th Chair, solo exhibition. The preview circulated through Art News, then ArtNet. And then the one that changed everything, the New York Times Art section, front page feature. A full photograph of Marina standing beside the centerpiece of the show. The painting was titled June 14th, an oak arch bathed in late afternoon light. 42 white chairs arranged in perfect symmetry. 7 occupied. 35 empty. Lavender tied to each backrest. Sunlight spilling across vacant seats, like a question no one wanted to answer. The article described the series as a study in familial absence and emotional displacement, rendered with devastating intimacy. It mentioned Victor Ashland. It mentioned Brenton Gallery's legacy. It used the word extraordinary. Opening night drew more than 200 guests, collectors, critics, curators. Quiet conversations held in front of paintings born from the most humiliating day of my life. A reporter approached Marina. The title June 14th, is it autobiographical? She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said calmly. It was our wedding day. 7 guests, 42 chairs. The room shifted, by morning. The article had been shared across every platform that mattered. I didn't have to say anything. The painting said it. Somewhere in Glastonbury, my father opened his tablet and saw those 35 empty chairs immortalized in oil. He saw sunlight striking absence with precision. My mother called that afternoon. Your father hasn't said a word since he saw it, she whispered. I didn't paint it, I replied. Marina painted what happened. Colette's reaction was different. She wasn't sad. She was furious. Within days, her friends began asking questions. Wait, why weren't you at your brother's wedding? Is that what that painting is about for years? She curated the image of a flawless family orbiting around her. Now there was a gallery wall with proof that the orbit had broken. Brett called Marina directly. Congrats. I have clients who might be interested in commissioning, she answered politely. I work exclusively through Caldwell, now. All inquiries go through the gallery. And then came the message that surprised me most. A screenshot from Aunt Patricia, in the family group chat. Colette had written, he's doing this to humiliate us, and for the first time in his life. My father replied, maybe we should have gone to the wedding. Truth didn't need revenge. It only needed light. And now it was hanging under gallery spotlights for everyone to see. 2 months after the exhibition opened, a notice appeared in the Connecticut Business Registry. Whitfield Properties LLC had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. At first, it was a rumor. Then it was confirmed. 2 failed developments in Stamford. A collapsed financing deal. Creditors circling. The company that had made Brett untouchable, the reason my parents chose baby showers over weddings, was suddenly a liability. Within weeks. The consequences reached Glastonbury. Brett stopped paying my parents' $3,200 mortgage. My mother's supplementary credit card was canceled. The Lexus was replaced with a used SUV. Security evaporated quickly when it wasn't yours to begin with. My father called me one evening. Not 23 missed calls. Just one. I answered. Adrian, I don't know how to say this. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Your mother and I might lose the house. Silence stretched between us. The same kind of silence I stood in on my wedding morning. I know I have no right to ask. He continued, but is there any way you could help? I leaned back in my chair. 6 months ago, I said evenly, you chose a baby shower over my wedding. You broke a promise. He didn't interrupt. I walked down that aisle with our landlord because you decided showing up for me wasn't worth the drive. His breathing was audible now. I'm not saying no, I continued, but I need you to understand something first. I am not your backup plan. I'm your son, and you treated me like I was optional. A long pause. You're right, he said quietly. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't eloquent, but it was the first honest sentence he'd given me in years. Colette called 2 days later. She opened soft. I miss you, Adrian. 30 seconds later. The pivot came. Brett lost everything. Mom and Dad need help. You and Marina are doing well now. Can't we just move past what I asked calmly? You scheduled your shower on my wedding day. You told Dad I could have a wedding anytime. I was pregnant, she snapped. I was hormonal. No, I said evenly. You were strategic. Silence. I'm not punishing you, I continued. But I won't let love be used as leverage anymore. If we rebuild anything, it starts with honesty, not money. She hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. The people who once had everything were now asking the son they sidelined to stabilize their lives. And this time, I wasn't negotiating from the bottom. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of a house that had only 2 names on the deed, mine and Marina's. It was a small 2-bedroom cottage in Westport. White siding, blue shutters, a wraparound porch that caught the evening light just before sunset. Nothing flashy, nothing performative. We paid for it outright. No mortgage, no assistance, no one else's leverage woven into the foundation. The ground floor had been converted into Marina's studio, proper ventilation, north-facing windows, a door that opened into a garden where we planted lavender in the spring. It bloomed in July. The 7th Chair series sold almost entirely during its 3-month run at Caldwell. Total revenue exceeded $600,000. Victor extended a second commission. 2 European galleries reached out. Marina's name began appearing in places my father used to read for market updates. My own career shifted too. At the Caldwell opening, an art director from a major children's publishing house noticed my illustration portfolio displayed quietly in the corner. 3 weeks later, I signed a multi-book contract. The first manuscript landed on our dining table in October. A story about a boy who plants wildflowers in a field where nothing was supposed to grow. I illustrated it every morning while Marina painted downstairs. Harold came for dinner every Sunday. He drove down from New Haven in his old Volvo, brought a bottle of wine, not expensive, just thoughtful, and sat at our table like he had always belonged there. Because he had. One evening, as we cleared plates, he raised his glass. To the 7th chair, he said. Marina smiled. I understood what he meant. 7 people at our wedding. 7 who showed up. 7 who remained. One Tuesday in early autumn, I heard gravel crunch in the driveway. I opened the front door and found my father standing there. No pretext, no request. I didn't come to ask for money, he said. I waited. I came to say I was wrong. The wind moved through the maple trees behind him. He looked older. Not just physically, heavier. I sat in a country club eating finger sandwiches while my son got married with 7 people, he said quietly. I will carry that for the rest of my life. I didn't rush to absolve him, I know, I said. I let him in for coffee. He walked slowly through the house, through Marina's studio, through the hallway where a smaller study of June 14th hung framed near the stairs. 42 chairs, 35 empty. He stood in front of it for a long time, before he left. He pulled something from a folder he'd brought with him. An old certificate, Connecticut Statewide Art Award. My name on it, dated 12 years earlier. I found it in the attic. He said, it should have been on your wall. I took it, not as repayment, as acknowledgement. Colette wrote a letter a month later, not a text, a handwritten letter. 1 sentence mattered. I scheduled the shower on your wedding day on purpose. I was afraid if your wedding went well, people wouldn't need me the same way anymore. I read that line 4 times. Then I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. Not trash, not display, just stored. My mother calls once a week now. She asks about the garden, about Marina's new series, about my book deadlines. She doesn't ask for money. It's a small change, but it's real. Brett took a position at another firm, starting over. Colette works for a nonprofit as an events coordinator. I hear she's good at it. I hope she is. As for me, I stand on the back porch some evenings and listen to the soft scrape of Marina's palette knife drifting from the studio window. The lavender moves in the breeze. 42 chairs, 7 people, 417 messages. In the end, the numbers don't define the story. What defines it is this. I stopped counting the people who left and started building with the ones who stayed. Revenge didn't look like shouting. It looked like ownership. It looked like boundaries. It looked like a life no longer built around someone else's approval. There's a line I've come back to more than once over the past year. Self-respect is the quietest form of revenge. You don't have to expose anyone. You don't have to scream. You don't even have to win an argument. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop negotiating your worth. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped standing on them alone. 42 chairs, 7 people, 417 missed calls. If you were in my place waking up to 417 messages from the same family who skipped your wedding, would you have answered, or would you have left the phone in the drawer? Tell me honestly in the comments. And if this story felt familiar in any way, if you've ever been the optional one, subscribe for the next story. It might find you at exactly the right time.